Welcome to you all. My name is Jim Stergios, Executive Director of Pioneer Institute, and there's a lot of echo here, so please put up with it. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this morning's event, Move This Portrait, the Know-Nothing Governor in Barriers to School Choice. We are grateful to our event co-sponsors, the Beckett Fund, the Black Alliance for Educational Options, the Center for Education Reform, Friedman Legacy Day, and we are especially grateful to our legislative sponsor, Representative John H. Rogers. And I'm going to start with some welcoming remarks from Representative Rogers. Ambassador Flynn, General Sullivan, honorable members, honored guests, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the People's House as a sponsor of this vital discussion. Unfortunately, I have been called away to a charitable event supporting the League School in my district, a publicly funded private special education school. The issue of school funding is very personal to me. As the ranking member of the Joint Committee on Education, an advocate for public schools, and a parent and product of parochial schools. I spend roughly $21,000 yearly on parochial school educations for my 3 daughters. If the parochial school in my district, St. Catherine of Siena School, closed its doors tomorrow, it would add $5 million to the foundation budget of the public schools in my district. Due to the bigoted, anti-Catholic, anti-Irish, anti-German, anti-immigrant, know-nothing language, which still stains our Commonwealth's Constitution, parents cannot even write the expenditures for private schools off on their taxes, despite the tremendous savings they generate for the municipalities they live in. The blind and indifferent public school zealot who refuses to see the savings and value parochial schools have and the symbiotic relationship they have with the public schools in a region forgets the words John Adams wrote in Chapter 5, Section 2 of the Massachusetts Constitution. Those words are a charge from John Adams and are moving even today. Let me quote, "It shall be the duty of legislatures and magistrates in all future periods of this Commonwealth to cherish the interests of literature and the sciences and all seminaries of them, especially the University at Cambridge, public schools and grammar schools in the towns, to encourage private societies and public institutions, rewards and immunities for the promotion of agriculture, arts, sciences, commerce, trades, manufactures, and a natural history of the country." The historical underpinnings and dubious motivations for the anti-aid amendment and the placement of a portrait of a governor whose image is a stark reminder of a time of intolerance in our Commonwealth are questions that deserve public hearing and discourse like the one you have today. Thank you for having the courage to have this discourse. We thank Representative Rogers for his hospitality and for his own courage. Let me frame today's event the following way. In 1854, the Massachusetts abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison's newspaper, The Liberator, asked, "Who was so wild to think that a party with a name as ridiculous as satire itself would spring up and absorb the elective strength of our state?" The Know-Nothings wrote a cunning platform of anti-Catholic nativism and progressive reforms to the largest electoral landslide in the history of Massachusetts. Led by Governor Henry Gardner, the Know-Nothings promulgated a bevy of bigoted, constitutionally suspect laws, including an amendment blocking Catholic families and schools from continuing to receive public dollars to best direct the education of their children. Their dominance of the State House lasted only 2 election cycles, but their anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant actions left a legacy that persists 160 years later here in Massachusetts. Today, upwards of 30 states have similar anti-aid or Blaine amendments or laws. Massachusetts has the oldest, we excel at what we do, and we have the worst. That's hardly surprising given the hostility of Massachusetts Know-Nothing Party and their governor towards Catholics, immigrants, and basic American principles of religious freedom. In the mid-19th century, Massachusetts, despite seeing a quarter of its population in Boston and other cities in the Commonwealth comprised of Irish immigrants, Irish immigrants were confronted by ethnic, religious, and economic prejudice, and yes, disturbing violence from urban Yankees. The new Irish immigrants sought what all immigrants seek when they come to America. They sought refuge from tyranny, religious freedom, jobs. Sadly, as author Jack Beattie noted, in the 1950s, the grammar of Massachusetts politics was being laid down. The Know-Nothings plotted their anti-immigrant rise in secretive fraternal lodges. They assured clandestine party membership with secret handshakes and the password, "I know nothing." Charles Francis Adams, the anti-slavery statesman whose grandfather drafted the Massachusetts Constitution, rebuked them as productive of nothing but fraud, corruption, and treachery. Sadly, Gardner's gubernatorial portrait stands up these stairs in a place of honor and prominence at the entrance to the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Is this really an appropriate way to mark entrance to the people's house? We at Pioneer don't believe in hiding from history. History is an indispensable guide for any free society. While Pioneer does not seek to erase the portrait or to erase the period of history, we can't. We believe that places of prominence in the State House should be reserved for people in the past who we respect, who upheld the public trust and the core principles of this country. Massachusetts leaders, we all have commented on other states and public entities like South Carolina's Confederate flag, the US Treasury's $20 bill featuring Andrew Jackson, Princeton University's troubled legacy with Woodrow Wilson. We ask Massachusetts leaders to look in the mirror and recognize our know-nothing past for what it was, to also see our inappropriate recognition of Governor Gardner and the horrendous bigotry that led to the Know-Nothing amendments. Henry Gardner and his know-nothings have no place being celebrated. Therefore, today, I call upon State House leaders to move the Gardner portrait to a less prominent place in the State House. These were not open-minded folks, they were not tolerant, they were thugs. It would be more fitting to see Gardner's portrait in some dark corner of the State House basement. Moving the Gardner portrait is a symbolic step, we recognize that, but we also think it's an important start. His Know-Nothing constitutional amendment is a major barrier to giving parents educational choices and benefiting tens of thousands of poor and minority kids trapped in chronically underperforming urban public schools. Make no mistake, Pioneer is deeply committed to our public schools. Probably there's no other organization as committed to it. We are committed to the full implementation of the Massachusetts Education Reform Act, which established, at this point, Massachusetts as a national leader and an international leader in education. We are proud of that legacy. However, we must have urgency in addressing the needs of kids across the Commonwealth that will take more school choice options, ones that go beyond charter schools, to embrace more vocational technical schools, more kids in the METCO program, private school choice, and yes, parochial schools, religious schools. Our neighboring states, New Hampshire and Rhode Island, have already started addressing this opportunity deficit by establishing modest education tax credit programs. Florida and numerous states across the country have done the same. If New Hampshire and Rhode Island can have greater school choice that includes religious schools, why not Massachusetts? If the nation's capital can boast a highly successful voucher program that serves thousands of poor kids, why can't Massachusetts? The fact is, we can. A 2012 poll that we commissioned from David Paleologos at Suffolk University found three things. There's majority opposition to Massachusetts anti-aid constitutional amendments prohibiting public money from going to religious schools. There is strong support to repeal Massachusetts anti-aid amendments if it means needy families can have access to more educational options. There is strong support for scholarship voucher programs to serve students in failing public schools. Tens of thousands of kids trapped in failing public schools. Strong evidence that residents across Massachusetts get it. and recognize the importance of educational options and recognize the importance of taking down barriers to those opportunities. What's missing is state leaders who muster the courage to reflect on the brutality and intolerance behind Massachusetts' anti-aid amendments. We are deeply grateful to have you with us. We're deeply grateful to have with us courageous voices in favor of educational choice for all children. You all have, or there are available, full biographical briefs on all of today's speakers. But please allow me to briefly introduce them in the order in which they will speak. Let me begin by introducing Ambassador Raymond Flynn, who has been a stellar, a tremendous ally, and a vocal advocate for school choice and for Catholic schools. Ambassador Flynn is a former 3-term mayor of Boston, U.S. ambassador to the Vatican, and the best-selling author of The Accidental Pope and John Paul II, a personal portrait of the Pope and the man. Con Chapman is a partner at Burns & Levinson in Boston, where he is co-chair of the Schools and Colleges Group. He represents a variety of educational institutions in governance, finance, and other issues. He devised a strategy for the Boyette versus Galvin case, a 1998 lawsuit that challenged the anti-aid amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution. Jason Bedrick is a policy analyst with the Cato Institute Center for Educational Freedom. Previously, Mr. Bedrick served as a legislator in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. Thank you for your work there, Jason. His research articles on school choice and religious freedom have been featured across the country. Grace Cotter-Regan is the head of school at St. Mary's in Lynn, a fabulous school. Previously, she was executive director of advancement for the New England Province of Jesuits. She holds a certificate in Catholic leadership from Notre Dame and a master's degree in pastoral ministry from the Boston College School of Theology. Gerard Robinson, thank you for traveling here. Gerard is a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He was the Commissioner of Education in the Commissioner of Education in Florida. I get this mixed up because you've done it in many states. And Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Previously, Mr. Robinson was the president of Black Alliance for Educational Options. We're grateful to all of you for your work here and around the country. Ambassador Flynn, please come to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with all of you. I look around the room and I see so many distinguished people in this field, educational choice and vouchers and educational alternatives. It's probably you that ought to be doing the speaking instead of me. Jim gave us a beautiful outline of the history of the Know-Nothing era movement here in Massachusetts. I won't go back over the same territory that Jim so eloquently stated. We have so many distinguished people here. I'm sure we'll all get to it, and you probably will know everything that I would say anyway. I will make a couple of observations that perhaps might have an impact on the broader community that needs to hear this argument. You know, I've been involved in politics now, I guess, about 40 some odd years, and I've learned one thing, that no matter what the cause is, no matter how right you may be, unless you're able to effectively articulate that point of view, the injustice prevails. I've seen so much of that over the years, and we shake our head and wonder why things don't change. Because, you know, don't they realize, even the legislature like this, or the Congress, don't they realize that this is wrong and that the law should be altered? You know, I have my little grandson here with me, and I'll tell you the reason why. We walked over here from South Boston. I couldn't get him on the bus. We would take care of him. And I couldn't go on the bus because people are going to work. And the carriage, he's a disabled boy, special needs child. And so he can't walk, talk. So he'll be 10 years old next week. So I walked over here from South Boston, and that's the reason why I don't even have a suit on or a sport coat, because I'm soaking wet with perspiration. But, you know, I was thinking, as Jim was talking, I have a well-prepared long speech that I won't necessarily give you, but I'll paraphrase some of the things. When I was listening to Jim, and last week I went up to the Pioneer Institute on Devonshire Street, and I had a chance to talk to Jamie and the entire staff who were hard at work preparing for this event and other things. I had a chance to talk about what I might say. But when listening to Jim and walking over here with Braden, I thought that, let me just tell you this little thing that resonates with me at this point in time. My wife is here with me, and my wife's sister had a special needs child. And at the time, Tommy Birmingham will know this because he was one of the leaders in education and special needs education for the kids in Massachusetts. But when I was elected, Tommy, back in 1970, Chapter 766 was not the law of Massachusetts. And we would rotate taking John, Kathy's nephew, down to St. Coletta's Church down around Situate, I guess, or Cohasset. But mother and father, there was no program for John in the public schools in Boston. In 371 cities and towns, most of them didn't have a special education program. So I would drive once in a while him down to the school and then come back and take my rightful place here in the Massachusetts legislature. And I would talk to my friend who was the Speaker of the House, Dave Bartley, who I used to play basketball with at college. And I'd say, David, this is wrong, that there's no program for kids who are special needs, handicapped, disabled here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that conversation led to other conversations. There was a state representative from Brighton, his name was Michael Daly, who was the chairman of the Education Committee. So people in higher positions of legislative power than I was started to work with various organizations, probably the Beckett Fund and different groups like that are advocates of education for children, all children, not just some children or public education, but all children. Well, anyway, that conversation grew and grew and grew, till finally, I think it was probably 72 or 73, was standing right upstairs, and the vote was taken for the passage of Chapter 766 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Well, there were a number of states that followed Chapter 766 across the country. Now think about it, how that actually started. I'm not taking credit for it by any stretch of the imagination, but it was the word of mouth. And we got parents of special needs children very much involved. And their voice was the most creditable voice you could possibly imagine. Far more creditable than mine or even the Speaker of the House of Representatives or the Governor of Massachusetts. I think it was Frank Sargent right after, at that time. Well, I learned a lesson from that. I learned from a lesson in if people of goodwill, people who believe in a cause and have values and are determined, they can change just about anything, and they can overcome all kinds of barriers. You know, last week, Braden, by the way, is in a special needs program now, and it's one of the best programs that I've ever seen. Here he is now in the State House, and the irony of that. and his grandfather being maybe one of the earliest supporters of it. And his grandfather was taking him in here in a state house that is completely handicapped accessible, that it wasn't then at the time when I used to take John and a lot of handicapped kids, disabled special needs kids from South Boston here all the time, would sit right here on these stairs and would talk to them and have lunch with them and have fun with them. But, you know, it's amazing to me, again, why it's so important for all of us to be involved like you are. Last week, I was in Ireland. I went with Cardinal O'Malley. Mayor Walsh was supposed to go with us, but last minute he couldn't go. So there's 200 people from Boston that went to Ireland. We went to the Shrine of Our Lady of Knock in Mayo. Kathy was with us, and we had a wonderful time. We stopped, as we were traveling through Ireland, at an immigration museum. Beautiful place, beautiful immigration museum. I had never been there before. And the curator was telling us all about the history of the potato famine, the immigration of Ireland coming to the United States. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? When you read all about the persecution, discrimination against the Irish, against Catholics in Ireland in the 1850s, and practically half the population perished or left. And the systematic programs, policies of the English in discriminating and persecuting against Catholics, it was just absolutely amazing. You say, how can this possibly have happened in one of the most enlightened places in the world during that period of time? And then you ask and you look and you study and you find out that very few people in the world had much to say. There was really no outrage. There was nothing written in the New York Times or any of the major publications and so forth. As a matter of fact, they just completely ignored it. And then they came to the United States looking for hope and opportunity in a new world. And what did they face? At the very same year, at the very same time, they faced discrimination in education and jobs and housing. No Catholics need apply. No assistance for kids to get an education. I looked at studying it and reading it and reading it. I looked at one of the things that Abraham Lincoln said at this very same time. That this day here, 1855. Here's what Abraham Lincoln wrote in 1855. This is our governor. Abraham Lincoln said, when the know-nothings get control, the Declaration of Independence will read, quote, all men are created equal except Negroes, foreigners, and Catholics. I mean, my God, what do we need to hear? And here are these people, my family, probably many of your family, came to this country seeking hope, opportunity, and what do they face? They face the situation here in Massachusetts, probably as bad as it was in Ireland. My friends, this is what we're facing here. But I think this. My grandchildren, not Braden and Gavin over here, but my other grandchildren were going to South Boston Catholic Academy. Now I would babysit them, Kathy and I would babysit them and would pick them up and I'd be in the schoolyard. This thing, I've worked with popes, I've worked with presidents, I've worked with prime ministers. I wrote speeches for presidents. But these little things that you see in your life's experiences kind of stick out. I'm standing in the schoolyard, 2 cabs come pulling up. Mothers frantically get out of the cab. They're working, they're coming from work. They're working in a bar in downtown Boston, or a restaurant. One of them worked in a restaurant. When they get out of the car, they ran across the schoolyard, and what they were concerned about is whether or not their kids had already been discharged from school, dismissed from school. Luckily, they weren't, but that's how concerned they were about their children. Now, the mother works, the father works 2 jobs. No help for those kind of families. You can't give them any kind of tax credit or any kind of voucher or anything like that. The government is oblivious to this concern. There's something wrong there. Think about if you organize those people. Let me tell you another story. Just before I was in politics, I was a probation officer over in Roxbury. Because of my basketball background, whatever job that I did, I always worked in the Black African-American community. People knew me. I'm visiting families over there in Dudley Street, St. Patrick's Church. So, visiting this family one day, and there's 3 kids. One of the children is going to St. Patrick's Catholic school. Well, this kid obviously was doing very, very well. The other one of the other 2 kids wasn't doing so well. That's the reason why I was there as a probation officer. He was going to public school in a very undisciplined environment. Now, I'll tell you that the one boy who went to St. Patrick's is in a very prominent position. He's a very respected citizen. He has a wonderful family, and he's making a great contribution to society. The other boy is not doing so well, and he hasn't done well over these years. Now, why couldn't we do something for this family, 3 kids? And 2 of them, they would have sent all 3 of them to St. Patrick's, but they didn't have the money, and they only could afford to send 1 kid to the school. You know, it's really sad when we can't do something about that. When we can't convince our political leaders that they shouldn't take a particular interest in our kids' education. Now, you've been struggling in the vineyards here in this cause. How do we deal with it? More importantly than convincing each other of the value and the merit of this, how can we convince each other that this is a just cause? Let me give you one other quick observation experience. After I left the Vatican, I was hired to do a national radio show every day. And it was broadcast out of Chicago. Unfortunately, the program was fortunately or unfortunately, but it was a very popular program in the West, in California and the West Coast. So I had to start the program at 6 o'clock in the morning. So if the night before I was speaking someplace in the Midwest, I'd operated out of the Sun-Times building in Chicago. And so if I weren't able to get up early, speaking somewhere the night before late, I'd get to the studio at 6 o'clock, 20 minutes to 6, quarter to 6. So I didn't even have chance to read the morning newspaper, the Chicago Tribune or the Chicago Sun-Times, and appeal to listeners across the country. So, you know how you start a program, you listen to the various talk shows, they start a program and they do like a 7-minute or an 8-minute or a 10-minute monologue, usually about politics or events of the day. So this one day, it was obvious to the audience that I was not prepared to do this, to give a constructive monologue. But I did anyway. And it wasn't very substantive, and the audience could anticipate that. Just after the break, people listening to my discussion, and I said, okay, we'll open up the lines for discussion. This fella called. He was from Bavaria, Illinois. And he said, and he obviously could tell that, you know, I needed some help here to make the program interesting. So he says to me, Mayor Flynn, do you know that in the history of the United States Congress, House of Representatives, there's never been a Catholic chaplain appointed or elected to be Catholic chaplain? Now this goes right back to its early formation. Now, I didn't even know how the chaplain of the House of Representatives got elected, appointed. He said, you know, it's the Speaker of the House that appoints the chaplain. And I thought to myself, well, gee, I was very close to John W. McCormick. He was from South Boston like I was. Tip O'Neill right over here, served right here in this House of Representatives. He's Catholic. John W. McCormick. I don't know if Joseph W. Martin from Attleboro was Catholic, I don't know. But anyway, there are at least 2 Catholic speakers of the House of Representatives and no Catholic chaplain of the House. So I let the man talk and educate the audience. I'm going somewhere with this, believe me. We took a break for a commercial. We came back. There were 11 or 13 lines going into the studio. It's a big radio station. 11 or 13 lines. Every single line was lit up. Every single line. Everybody wanted to weigh in. And these are people from all across the country. General manager of the station came down to me. He said to me, we can't keep up with this. These calls are incredible. What's happening? You got the whole country talking about this issue. So 3 hours I'm on the radio every day. So the program ends, very successful program. Everybody's happy with the conversation. It was mostly people weighing in, listening, talking about their concern. Well, I showed up the next morning. Now, the night before, I'm well prepared to be talking about the events of the day. I have 2 or 3 prominent guests that are going to come on the show. About 5:30, 5:45, I'm ready to go on the show. 13 lines all lit up. Before I even say what the topic is going to be. Well, that went on that day, and then I'm saying, now we got to move on. The 3rd day, boss comes in, says, no, we're not moving off this. This is the topic we're going to stay with. 13 lines lit up. 9 consecutive hours. You know what happened? I got a phone call from the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. And he said, Ambassador Flynn, do you realize what you have done? You gave out the Capitol telephone number. We can't get any business done here in Washington, D.C. That's all people want to talk about. And I said, well, you know, what are you complaining to me about, Mr. Speaker? I says, this is not my call. I said, you can change this just like that if you wanted to. So he says, well, you're not suggesting that I should appoint a Catholic chaplain because of the fact that radio talk show says that, you know, people are outraged. I said, well, that's a decision that you're going to have to make, Mr. Speaker. I says, but I just want to assure you that this is a great topic, and I'm going to stay right on it. And that's all right. About 20 minutes after the show was over, got another phone call from the speaker. And he said, you know what? I think we might reevaluate the policy. Well, they did. And the Catholic got elected Speaker of the United States, Chaplain of the United States House. Me? Nothing to do with me. The man from Bavaria, a retired postal official, postal worker, a retired postal worker, had the courage to call that radio show, and what an impact he had. That could be you. That could be any one of us. When there is something that you believe, and you have the courage to speak out about it, you can change anything. Take my word for it. I've seen major change in politics from Washington, from the Vatican, from right here in this house. Special needs kids. Politicians are pretty good people. I know a lot of them, but you got to give them the right information. If you give them the right information, they'll do the right thing. If you show them that there's political strength behind you, they definitely will do the right thing. So there we are, my friends. That's what this issue is about. That's what this issue is about. It's about people like you, good people, speaking for those two mothers that jump out of the cab every day at South Boston Catholic Academy, coming from a bar in downtown Boston because they want to work the extra job so they can afford to pay their kids' tuition. But what about those two kids over here in Roxbury that didn't go to St. Patrick's? I could tell you where one of the kids is, but I won't. See, this is the job that we have ahead of us. We have to make sure that our voice and our courage is heard in the highest places of authority. Begins right here, Massachusetts State House, 1855. It's about time we remove this portrait. It's about time we change the law. Thank you very much. God bless you.